Hello, my name is Fred Salmon Mijage from Edukea Tanzania company. Welcome in this session. It is just history from 5, the topic number 6. So we are going to see the topic number 6, which is so-called the influence of external forces and the rise of nationalism and the struggle for independence. This is the topic number 16 from 5, history. So let us see the subtopics which must be covered in this topic, and thus subtopics are impacts of vessel peace treaty after First World War, Pan-African movement, impacts of Second World War and subsequent changes, and the last subtopic is influences on independence of India and Burma. So we are going to pass through these subtopics. Let us start with the definition of nationalism. Nationalism in Africa was a desire of African people to terminate all foreign rule. Basically, nationalism is the political will of people of Africa in opposition of foreign domination. It means that African nationalism or nationalism in Africa was a desire of African people to terminate all foreign rule. Or basically we can define nationalism as the political will or political will of the people of Africa in opposition of foreign domination, but in favor of African rule. Nationalism, by the definition, it is the feeling of national consciousness by the people that they are members of the national states and desire freedom from colonial rule. Nationalism is the will or the desire or the feeling of nation consciousness by the people that they are members of the national states to regain the freedom or the desire of freedom from the domination or external or foreign domination. And nationalism in Africa or in the African context refers to the desire of African people to terminate all foreign rules and live under government of their own choice so as to preserve their political, economic and social interests. It means that nationalism in the African context refers to the desire of African people to terminate all foreign rule and live under the government which have been elected or chosen by themselves, and to defend or to preserve their political, economic and social interests. So here we can see that this is the nationalism in Africa by showing the map whereby the African countries were struggling to attain their independence, and this is the African continent. So you can see that this is African continent whereby the African countries were dominated by the European powers. So it means that the hostility against the colonial rule was due to the fact it was hindering the struggle for the creation of nation states. It means that the hostility against the colonial rule was due to the fact that it was hindering the struggle for the creation of national states. Hence, nationalism was identified with the struggle for independence. It means that the colonial rule was acted as a hindrance or challenge to the struggle of creation of national states in African countries. Hence, the nationalism was identified with the struggle for independence. National consciousness was a gradual process that was not overnight phenomena. It means that the national consciousness was a gradual process that involved the progress or the gradual change, which was not took place on one time or on one phase, but it was taken under gradual processes. And the African nationalism passed through two phases, which were before the 1945 and after 1945. So these were phases of African nationalism. So the first was before 1945. It means that the process of decolonization or nationalization or national liberation was fundamental in Africa. It means that the process of decolonization or national liberation was fundamental in Africa. It allowed the African state to regain their independence, which they had lost for more half century. It means that this means the African nationalism allowed the African state to regain their independence, which had lost for almost half century. Nationalism before 1945 was realistic that it was directly related to a political goal. It means that this was the nationalism that was occurred before the 1945. It means what the earliest, it was the earliest stage of nationalism. Earliest that it was not directly related to a political goal. It means that it was not based on the political independence. It was based on their interest according to the areas where the struggle for interests were taking place. It was intended to seize or to bring political power. The main aim of the Africans at this stage was to have reforms in colonialism, such as end of land alienation, taxation, and forced labor. It means that the main goal objective was not to gain the political power, but the main aim was to make Africans to see or to witness some reforms during colonialism, such as land alienation or to eliminate land alienation, taxation, and forced labor in African colonies. But after 1945, the rise of African nationalism data back to the period of colonial conquest and the imposition of colonial rule on one end and the primal African resistance against colonial rule on the other end. It means that the rise of nationalism after 1945 can be traced back towards the colonial or during the colonial conquest and the imposition of colonial rule. On one end are the primal African resistance against the colonial rule on the other end. But later the intensification of exploitation stimulated the nationalistic struggle. It means that as time went on, the exploitation was intensified and that stimulated the nationalistic struggle. Nationalism was seriously nationalistic. It aimed at overthrowing alien rule. It means colonial rule. It means the nationalist struggle was aimed at overthrowing the colonial rule. The Africans were not interested in just challenges but complete independence. It means that during this stage the Africans were aiming much at attaining their lost independence and not changes but the complete independence of their nations. So as we have been guided by the subtopics which are present in our topic, let us see the impacts of peace settlement or Versailles Treaty after the First World War. But before going to seeing the impacts, we can pass through the Versailles Peace Treaty that was done in 1919. The end of First World War was followed by the peace settlement reached by series of peace treaties, whereby this treaty was aimed at maintaining world peace and security after the eruption of First World War in 1919. This was made in Paris, France. It means that The important one was the Versailles Treaty. This was made in Paris, France, held in January to June 1919. It was signed on 28th June 1919. It means that the Versailles Peace Treaty was held in Paris, France, with the aim of maintaining world peace and security after the First World War, in order to protect or to ensure that no occurrence of other world war. And the Versailles Peace Treaty was held from January to June 1919, as it was signed in 28 June 1919. Leading statements in Versailles were preceded of US. It was added, or the leading statements in Versailles were preceded of USA Woodrow Wilson, Clemens George, the Prime Minister of France, Lloyd George, the Prime Minister of Britain, and of Vittorio Orlando, the Prime Minister of Italy. It means that these were the main leaders who attended the Versailles Peace Treaty in France, Paris, led to the negotiation about how they will maintain the world peace and security after the First World War. It means the head or the chairman of that Versailles Peace Treaty was Woodrow Wilson, who was the US President. Another was George Clemenceau, the Prime Minister of France, Lloyd George, the Prime Minister of Britain, and Vittorio and the Prime Minister of Italy. These were the leaders who attended the Versailles Peace Treaty. The leading role was played by the President Wilson, or Woodrow Wilson of USA. It means that the leader was played by President Wilson Woodrow of USA. After looking the short definition about Versailles Peace Treaty, let us see the terms of the Versailles Peace Treaty, which was conducted or which was held from January to June 1919. In the term of this treaty, Germany was highly humiliated as follows. It means that during the Versailles Peace Treaty, the German was highly humiliated by that treaty. And these were the terms of Versailles Peace Treaty of 1919. The first one, or the first term, was German. It means that she lost all overseas possessions. It means that not she. Here German used he because was guarded or regarded to be the superpower, or to be the country which was super or superior more than all countries in the world. It means that he lost all overseas possessions. Example, Tanganyika, Togo, Rwanda, Burundi, and Namibia. It means that German had to lose his overseas colonies like Tanganyika, Togo, Rwanda, Burundi, and Namibia. But also his provinces are taken during the French. It means his provinces are taken during the Franco-Prussian War, were given to France, and return all French flags taken by her during the Franco-Prussian War. It means that the whole provinces during the during the Franco-Prussian War that was taken place in 1870 up to 1871. The province Alsace and Lorraine was returned back, or were returned to France. Another was, he was forced to disarm himself. It means that German was forced to disarm or to reduce the armament or developing the armies. Also, Germany universal military service were broken. Also, Germany universal military service were broken. These all terms were conducted during the Versailles Peace Treaty. But also, his army were reduced. It means the German army was reduced to 100,000 soldiers with no generals. It means that the army of Germany was reduced to 100,000 soldiers with no general. Its naval was reduced to 6 freight battleships. It means that the battleships of German was reduced to 60 battleships, and the few smallest crafts, the Air Force, were banned. It means that you can see how German was humiliated during the Versailles Peace Treaty, whereby its navy was reduced to 60 battleships, and the few smallest crafts were remained, and the Air Force were banned. The Air Force of German was banned. The fourth one, German had to pay war reparations. It means that German to pay reparation to be paid to France, Britain and Belgium. It means that German was supposed to pay the war reparation to the victorious power like France, Britain and Belgium. They were fixed at 6.6 million. It means that that's all money would be paid by German, as he was considered as the causative of the First World War. His federation with Hungary or Austria-Hungary was broken. It means that the federation or the union of Germany with his fellow Austria-Hungary was broken, whereby Austria was remained as an independent country and Hungary was remained as an independent country. But also, German had to lose the concession and the trading rights in China, Egypt and elsewhere. It means that the German was placed under the trading conditions, or whereby German had to lose the right to make trading activities with China, Egypt and elsewhere. But also German was, it means that also German was delivered to the right of joining the League of Nations. It means that denied the right to join on the League of Nations. The term aimed at weakening German politically, economically and militarily. It means that these all terms which were directed to German was aimed to weaken the German in all aspects of life, specifically politically, economically and military. What were the weaknesses of the treaty or Versailles Peace Treaty? It lacked the enforcement mechanism. Decision remained in the theory but in practical. It means that the Versailles Peace Treaty come up with those terms, but the enforcement mechanism was lacked, and the decisions which were made during the Versailles Peace Treaty remained on the theory and not practiced. But also, as harshness to Germany appeared to peace, the Germans never accepted the treaty, and finally it led to the rise of Nazism. It means that as the harshness of the Versailles Peace Treaty to Germany appeared to the threat of the world peace, as the Germans never accepted the treaty or terms which was passed by the Versailles Peace Treaty, and finally Germany led to the rise of Nazism, which was actually a threat to the world peace. The decisions made did not satisfy some of the victorious powers. That is, Italy did not satisfied by the territorial division at the treaty. This led to the rise of fascism. It means that the decisions that were made during the Versailles Peace Treaty did not satisfy some of the victorious power. That is, Italy did not satisfy by the territorial division and the treaty. That led to the rise of fascism. But also, the decision ignored the role of USSR as the influential power in Eastern Europe. It means that the decision ignored the role of USSR as an influential power in Eastern Europe. So we can see that the decision that made during the Versailles Peace Treaty ignored the role of USSR, or the Union of Soviet Socialist Republic as an influential power in the Eastern Europe. Example, the Balkan states remained at a trouble area. But also, the peace treaty was not a solution simply because it created more problems than to solve it. It was too humiliating to Germany, and Germany was to revenge by all means. When the Leffler came to power, it means when Hitler came to power, when Adolf Hitler, it means that the peace treaty was not a solution simply because it created more problems than to solve it. It was too humiliating to Germany when Germany was to revenge by all means, and when Hitler came to power, he decided to turn down all the terms and began arming against the Versailles, as a situation which contributed to the outbreak of the Second World War of 1939 to 1945. So these were the weaknesses of the Versailles Peace Treaty. So after that, let us see the factors for the rise of African nationalism. The factors for the rise of African nationalism. What were the factors for the rise of African nationalism? The first one was the Pan-African Conference. Let us see the factors that led to the rise of African nationalism. But before looking the factors for the rise of African nationalism, we can see a little look on Pan-African conferences, whereby there are different conferences which were conducted to ensure that the African countries are getting the independence. The first Pan-African conference was consequently convened in England in 1900 under the leadership of Sylvester Williams, a barrister from Trinidad. Among other things, the conference discussed the human rights violations against Africans in South Africa and racial discrimination against people of African origin in the New World. And the second conference of Pan-Africanism movement was the second Pan-African conference took place after the First World War. That took place after the First World War in 1919. It attracted 50 participants, with 12 of them coming from the African continent. So after there, let us see the various factors that led or contributed to the rise of nationalism. It means, as we know, that African nationalism was contributed by both internal and external factors, whereby we are going to start with the internal factors. There were various factors that contributed to the rise of nationalism. These factors were categorized into two: internal and external factors. By starting with internal factors, we are going to look on different factors that internally led to the rise of African nationalism. Internal factors, these were those that stimulated hostility from within Africa. The main factors was colonialism, which is divided into two sub-factors. The first one was exploitation, and the second one was payment of low prices to peasant products. The first as categorized in internal factors were exploitation, whereby exploitation involved different categories, like land alienation, whereby the African lands were taken by the Europeans to establish different projects like plantations, farms, and mining centers. For example, land alienation was common in settler colonies such as Zimbabwe, Kenya, and other areas. But also, as the kind of exploitation was taxation, whereby the colonialists established taxation to the Africans. The Africans were supposedly to pay tax. For example, matiti tax, pori tax, ati tax, dog tax, and other taxes which were introduced by the colonialists in the African colonies. So due to those taxes which were introduced for the Africans to be paid, the Africans were not ready or were being exploited by the colonialists, and that's why they decided to wage on the African nationalism, or to go against with those taxes which were introduced by the colonialists. But another kind of exploitation was forced labor. It means the Africans were forced to work on the plantations and the mining centers. The colonialists introduced the labor laws that completed or forced the Africans to provide cheap and sometimes free in European economic enterprises. Laws such as Kipande system in Kenya completed all able bodies to provide cheap labor on white settlers' farms. Failure to provide labor punishment was given to those Africans. To mean that forced labor, you can see that the colonialists were introduced the various labor laws which forced the Africans people to work on the colonial farms and plantations, as well as mining centers, so that they can help the Europeans to get their demands or their interest. For example, the laws such as Kipande system, which was introduced in Kenya, completed all-bodied people in Kenya to provide cheap labor. Failure to do so, or the people who denied to do so in white settler in Kenya, provided with the punishment, or were given the punishment by the colonialists. Another
Purchase your tracks